Hi, you've talked a bit about how painful it is for some foundations, for example, to set up their program-related investments. And I was wondering, what other changes from a regulatory point of view you think need to be made in the next few years to make sure that we facilitate the flow of capital to impact investing?
Well, let me just, it's interesting. If I start off from a foundation perspective, I think there's a change of paradigm and mindset that needs to be made that doesn't even require regulatory change. And that is that among a number of large foundations, to a point that was brought up here about you bring in a bunch of outside board members, they're tremendously focused on the financial return. I get issues all the time when I meet with foundations. Well, yeah, our chief investment officer won't allow us to do it because he or she says that it doesn't meet the fiduciary standard. And one, that's just simply not true. And there's a way to meet a fiduciary standard by setting the right guidelines for how to invest for impact. But two, I actually think it goes beyond that. I've argued with foundations that they've gotten a tax deduction for these dollars that are supposed to be directed toward mission. And I would actually argue that dollars that were not invested for impact shouldn't be meeting the fiduciary standard, and that we should begin to change that paradigm. I'm reluctant to argue for regulation that way because you just never know where it might come out. But I do think there's a paradigm shift that's required there, and I think that some people are starting to go through that and realize that a properly drafted investment policy statement can actually allow for and encourage and include within the fiduciary responsibility double or triple bottom line investing.
I would say we just finished an investment policy statement for a family foundation that is spending out over the next 10 years and articulated that. So one of the issues that theoretically holds people back is this question of making a jeopardizing investment, and that's the fiduciary standard for foundations, that you'll make a lousy investment that will lose money and jeopardize your future. And these guys said, we're going to be broke in 10 years, right? That's the goal. We're spending down. So there is no such thing as a jeopardizing investment. And so in their context, they said that means, any investment we do to advance our mission, like that's the best we can do in these last 10 years of our life. And just taking that thinking. And I think Ron's point is a very important one to be mindful of, is opening the regulatory box is a double-edged sword. And to be very careful of unintended consequences, because there's a lot we can do within the legal toolkit we have today. So there's clarifying that you can make non-jeopardizing mission investments. So Omidyar has come, with their general counsel, Will Fitzpatrick, said, I say a 10% carve-out from our endowment managed prudently for mission. That's not jeopardizing on a portfolio basis. Therefore, why not? And I think developing theory and practice to use the existing legal framework to do more work, I think helps a lot. And then broadly, having successes that can help drive that change that Ron is talking about. And I think this is one of the things for foundations is having approaches that are designed for what they want to do. I think pushing foundations, the large foundations that do this, because once again, it will make them better at their core business of philanthropy, that we've seen gets real movement, as opposed to saying you care about vulnerable kids, invest in the environment. It's like, no, you care about vulnerable kids, invest in vulnerable kids. And as the marketplace develops, so people can do things that feel better structured, better managed, drawing on better history, which takes time to create, better supported, and better aligned with what they're trying to do. The wheels, I think, just are going to start turning faster and faster.
So on the regulatory side, putting it through a political process in the U.S., you don't know what kind of hamburger you're going to get out on the other side.
Just add for the debt ceiling.
But that doesn't mean there's not clarifications in policy. So for example, another homework assignment for you, the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission has actually said that carbon is a true material risk to companies and needs to be discussed, but it's at the company's own choice if they want to discuss it. So there's a disconnect between actually being a material risk that will cause financial downside and a requirement to actually disclose it. So write to your SEC, write to your congressman and senator, but this is an implementable policy without legislative change that can be done in the executive branch. So there are things like that to increase transparency. And the more we increase that transparency, so for example, at the end of November in India, the SEC of India has declared that the top 100 companies in India need to disclose their environmental, social, and governance metrics. That's a practice that if you're one of the top 100 companies in India, you need to pursue. Now, the interesting thing is most of them are already doing it. If you, I don't know how many people, actually raise your hand if you've read an annual report from an India-based company. Okay, good, 2. Okay, 3, fantastic. All right, so go to Infosys and go to their investor relations part of their site and open up their annual report. And you'll see several things. One, you'll see the founder, the chief mentor, Narayana Murthy, talk about people for the first 10 pages of the report. So that's something you might see in a U.S. annual report. But then go to the section marked Human Resource Valuation. And what you'll find is Infosys has actually gone out and calculated the asset value of its people according to the Lev-Schwartz model, an intangible value analysis. And instead of just the physical assets like the chairs and computers and tables, they value people as an asset. That's something you won't find in the US in any annual report or sustainability report. You won't find it in Europe, but you'll find it in Tata, Infosys, the oil and gas company in India. And you'll also find the salaries of about the top 400 people in the company. So there's a move towards transparency in India, in Singapore, in Hong Kong, in Korea, that is not being pursued here. So I'd say, answer to your question, transparency, 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 because when you quantify things, put them on a list, and you see whether you're first or last, human nature kicks in, and then customers have free, available information to make a choice. So vote with what you buy, choose where you work, vote with how you invest, and vote your interest for sustainability.